Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Perez coming to you from Baltimore. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte recently completed a major visit to China, where the two countries reached several economic and military-related agreements. Also, while visiting Japan this week, President Duterte renewed his earlier comments about the possibility of cutting off military cooperation with the U.S. During a press conference following the visit in Japan, this is what Duterte had to say in reference to the U.S.-Philippine military cooperation agreement.
If I stay here long enough, one day that EDCA will, if it's an executive agreement, then I will just... I do not want to see any military man of any other nation except the Philippine soldier.
A spokesperson for the U.S. State Department, Josh Kirby, reacted with measured remarks, saying the U.S. was not going to react and respond to every bit of rhetoric from Mr. Duterte. Joining us now from Japan to take a closer look at these shifting alliances in the Philippines is Walden Bello. Walden is former Philippine congressman serving 3 terms, during which time he co-authored 2 joint resolutions seeking the termination of the Philippines Visiting Forces Agreement with the United States. Walden Bello is also the author of Capitalism's Last Strands, Globalization in the Age of Austerity. Walden, I thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me on, Sharmini.
Walden, give us a take on how present the U.S. is in the Philippines and in the South China Sea, to give us some idea of the strategic importance of Philippines to the United States and China in the region.
Well, the United States has had 2 major agreements with the Philippines over the last few years. One is the Visiting Forces Agreement that basically allows the U.S. to rotate troops for training with Philippine forces. And in 2014, the U.S. and the Philippines concluded the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement that basically would allow the United States to create military bases in nominally Philippine bases. And the whole thrust of Washington is to basically contain China. The redeployment of the bulk of naval forces of the United States to the Pacific. This is part of it, and it's also known as the pivot to Asia. So while Japan is the northern anchor of the U.S. Strategic posture in the Western Pacific, the Philippines is the southern anchor. So the Philippines plays a fairly major role in Washington's strategy.
Now, Walden, during Duterte's visit to China, he suggested that the Philippines' claims on the South China Sea could take a back seat to improve relations with China, and the 2 countries obviously signed several new economic cooperation agreements, which included fishing rights, investments, among other things. Now, give us some sense of what these alliances with China by way of the economy will do to the Philippines and their relations.
Well, I think that first of all, I think that there is a great deal of dissatisfaction on the part of President Duterte with the state of relations with the United States. My own sense is he really does not put much trust in the U.S. Supporting the claims of the Philippines in the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea. And legally speaking, indeed, the U.S. has said that it's not bound to protect the Philippine claims in those areas.
So, Walden, from what you are saying, it looks like Philippines has moved another step closer to realigning itself away from the U.S. and towards China. This happened in the late 1990s as well. What does this mean in terms of the U.S. role in the Philippines and in the region?
Well, this would put a spanner, if he carries it out, it would just put a spanner into the U.S. strategic posture. As I said, there are those two military treaties that Duterte has, the Philippines has with the United States. And he could easily, in fact, abrogate those treaties. The Visiting Forces Agreement, all it takes is for the Philippine government to give notice of 6 months, and that will also end the Enhanced Defense Security Agreement. So this would be the implications if he were to carry it out. Now, the question is, despite his strong anti-American statements recently, is Duterte willing to go and tear up these agreements at this point in time? And in his recent visit to Japan, he alluded to the fact that he might, in fact, depart from these agreements. But the question for everybody at this point is, how serious is he? Is there going to be a follow-through on this? And so that's with respect to the U.S. With respect to China, I think that there is, of course, the very strong push for economic cooperation, for investment, and to be able to share in the Chinese economic growth more fully. That's there. And with respect to military alignment, I think that's still quite vague. I think what he wants to do is just to create a better atmosphere between China and the Philippines. And the one thing, though, that I think he will maintain is the Philippines, the Hague Declaration that declares null and void China's claims to the 90% of the South China Sea. Now, he has said that that would be put on the back burner, but if you look at the statements, he has not said that the Philippines is, in fact, going to abandon that Hague decision that really was in favor of the Philippines. So,
well, what is that
words,
contestation about? What is the specificity of that contestation between China and the Philippines?
Well, it's about basically the West Philippine Sea, as we call it, or the South China Sea. There are, about 6 claimant countries to the area and to the different island formations in the area. China has said, that it belongs to 90% of the South China Sea belongs to it, and essentially the decision in The Hague about 3 months ago basically said that there was no legal basis to China's claims to the waters and to the island terrestrial formations or islands in that area. So that was basically what that decision was all about. It was a legal defeat for China in the tribunal. And basically what Duterte is saying, as far as I can gather, is that he's not going to press that decision at this point. He is going to warm up to China, but leave the resolution of the territorial claims between the two countries for a later period. So that's in essence what he has been claiming at this point in time in terms of the territorial disagreements between the Philippines and China.
Walden, obviously Philippines is very important, but what other alliances does China have in the region that's going to help them in this effort against U.S. trying to encircle China?
First of all, I don't think we can call it an alliance at this point. It certainly is a warming of relations, but where Duterte and China bring this is still, it still has to be developed. The situation at this point is China, there is a territorial disagreements, but China also is vastly influential in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations mainly because of its economic power, but there's also the military power of China that many of the countries have a great degree of respect for, or what you might say, fear of. So there's that element of China being a major power in this part of the world. Now, what's happening right now is there is this emerging China, and there is the counterbalance that is being pushed by the United States at this point. The United States' strategy is really to encircle and contain China, and Japan and South Korea and the Philippines are part of that process. So essentially what's happening is that if Duterte in fact pushes through with his threats to cancel the treaties with the United States, that would knock off the southern anchor of the U.S. Strategy. Now, the question, of course, is will he do that? That is, in fact, what people are discussing at this point, whether there will be a follow-through on that, or will it simply be putting these treaties into cold storage and not really leaving the alliance, but basically just toning it down and not really giving it more life. So, these are all the questions that are there at this point. And of course, within the Philippines itself, there's a great deal of confusion. Is Duterte serious? In the past, he has been seen as taking back his statements, or he makes one statement and then his subordinates say, well, he really didn't mean that, or he was exaggerating. So essentially what has happened at this point is that, yes, there has been a strong rhetorical break of the president from the United States, but people are still confused as to whether, in fact, there will be a follow-through on this. And of course, the region, since the Philippines is so essential to the U.S. strategy, so many of the different countries in the region are also watching this very closely, because it could mean really, a major geopolitical shift in the area if the Philippines and if Duterte follows through with his threat to realign with China and, as he said, with Russia.
All right. Walden, I thank you so much for joining us today, and I really appreciate you staying up late to do this interview. Thank you.
Okay, thank you too.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.